This morning, everything was still there. But the feeling was different. Not the kind of difference that's obvious. Not strong enough to name right away. Just that when Taurus opened their eyes, they didn't jump up like usual. The body still remembered the old rhythm, but somewhere inside, there was a soft hesitation, as if someone had quietly slowed down the invisible clock hanging in the chest. Light from the window filled the room in a gentle way. Not too bright. Not gloomy. It simply rested there, calm and patient, enough to show that a new day was waiting, but without pushing. Taurus stayed still for a few extra seconds. Maybe staring at the ceiling. Maybe listening to the faint sound of wind outside. Not because of tiredness. Not because of sadness. Just a quiet sense of not wanting to leave that moment yet. There were mornings before when Taurus woke up with a full list already running in the mind. Clear tasks. Familiar routines. A sense of safety in knowing exactly what came next. But this morning felt different. Not like being lost. More like standing on a familiar road and suddenly realizing there was no need to walk fast anymore. No one said to slow down. The feeling came from inside. I've spent time observing people who carry Taurus energy, and there's something quietly fascinating about them. They rarely change all at once. When something shifts, it happens softly, like a small flame in a quiet room. It doesn't flare up. It simply changes color, just a little. If you're not paying attention, you might miss it. But once you notice it, it's impossible to ignore. That morning, Taurus might pour coffee more slowly than usual, might stand there longer watching the steam rise and fade. Small movements, ordinary moments, yet inside them is a feeling of permission to not rush. As if something deep within is whispering, it's okay. Take your time. Taurus might not fully understand why this feels different. Nothing big happened. No special news. The outside world looks exactly the same. But inside something is settling. Not heavy, just a little deeper. And in that quiet settling, Taurus begins to hear subtle rhythms that used to be drowned out by motion and noise. Sometimes, a morning that feels unfamiliar is not a sign of loss or dramatic change. It's simply the moment when a person realizes they've been moving in the same rhythm for a long time. And now the body and the mind are curious about another pace. Slower, warmer, more honest. Taurus doesn't usually welcome disruption, but that's exactly why even a few seconds of pause can carry real meaning. Like standing in a quiet room at dawn, before the city fully wakes up. Nothing that needs to be done right away. Nothing that needs to be decided. Just being there. Fully present with yourself. That morning passed in a very ordinary way. But the feeling didn't completely return to what it was before. And maybe Taurus doesn't need to understand it right now. It may be enough to notice that some days begin differently, not to change a life, but to gently remind us that we are still listening to ourselves in a soft, caring way. And as the day begins to unfold, Taurus notices that it isn't only the morning that feels different. Things that once felt deeply familiar seem to be shifting in tone, so subtly that without paying attention, it would be easy to miss. The schedule is still there. The hours still follow one another. People still appear with familiar faces. Yet inside, the response is quieter than before. Events happen, but they no longer pull the mind along with them. Some conversations that once brought a sense of comfort now feel softer. Not because of distance. Not because connection has been lost. Words arrive, then leave, without echoing for too long. They create a pause, long enough for Taurus to notice the rhythm of their own breathing. A pause that isn't empty, but filled with things that don't yet have names. The familiar room still holds the same objects. The same light turns on each evening, yet Taurus no longer feels the need to fill the space with sound. The television may be turned off earlier. The familiar music doesn't always need to play. Silence slowly becomes a soft background, where thoughts are allowed to slow down and emotions are allowed to appear without needing an immediate reaction. There are relationships Taurus once held very tightly, not out of fear of loss, but as a way of showing care and loyalty. Lately, That closeness no longer needs constant proof. It doesn't depend on always being near or speaking all the time. It exists in a quieter form, like a small lamp still glowing through the night, not needing to be seen to be known as present. In moments like these, Taurus begins to realize they are no longer pulled by every movement outside. Things that once made the heart race now pass by like a light breeze. Not from indifference, but because something inside has settled deeply enough to remain steady even when small details shift. That silence carries a feeling that's hard to describe. It asks for nothing to change. It doesn't push for decisions. It simply opens a space wide enough for Taurus to look at themselves without editing or adjustment. Some afternoons drift by more slowly, as sunlight gradually leaves the window, and Taurus sits there, doing nothing in particular, yet sensing a quiet fullness that doesn't need explanation. Perhaps when familiar things grow less noisy, it isn't a sign of loss at all. It may simply be life turning the volume down so the inner voice has room to be heard. And within that calm space, Taurus begins to feel movements that are very subtle, very deep, happening quietly beneath the surface, without needing to be named, and without needing to be understood right away. And then there comes a very ordinary moment when Taurus realizes they've traveled quite far along a familiar road, so familiar that the feet kept moving without much thought. That road isn't a bad one. In fact, it once felt exactly right. It was safe. It was clear. It offered enough certainty for Taurus to place each step with confidence. But standing midway along it, the first feeling isn't confusion. It's a quiet stillness that's hard to name, like standing beneath a streetlight late at night, looking back at the footprints just left behind on the ground. There's no honking, no one urging them forward. Just a natural pause, the kind that happens when the body knows it's time to rest, even though it isn't tired yet. Taurus looks back at the stretch already traveled, not with regret, not with self-criticism. Just looking. Some parts were walked with steady confidence. Some stretches were taken faster than necessary. And there are sections that once felt puzzling, moments Taurus didn't understand at the time, yet now appear clearly in the light of distance. A question briefly passes through the mind, without pressure. It doesn't demand a change of direction. It doesn't ask for a final answer. It simply hangs there, like a thin veil of smoke in the air. Am I walking because of habits shaped over time, or because I still truly want to reach where this road leads? Thinking this doesn't bring worry. Instead, it opens a small inner space, just wide enough to breathe. On some afternoons, Taurus stands by a window, watching people move through the world at their own pace. Everyone following their own path, their own rhythm. And in that moment, it becomes clear that stopping doesn't make the road meaningless. It simply sharpens what can be seen, the way late-day sunlight slants across the ground and reveals details that stay hidden at noon. That pause doesn't last long, but it lasts long enough for Taurus to sense something gentle and true. There's no need to walk fast just to prove that progress is still happening. Some steps only matter because they come after standing still. And sometimes, it's in those unhurried moments that Taurus hears their own heartbeat more clearly, steady, slow, still there. The road ahead remains open. It hasn't disappeared. But instead of moving forward by reflex, Taurus allows a few more moments to stay, to look, to feel, to be present. Not to find answers right away, but simply to know that the journey continues with fuller awareness, in a way that feels personal, grounded, and unmistakably Taurus. As night settles in, movement outside begins to slow, and the room seems to lower its own breathing with it. The yellow light isn't bright. It's just enough to trace soft shadows along the walls. In the past, moments like this often made Taurus want to fill the space. A familiar song, the low sound of the television, any kind of noise, just so silence wouldn't stay too long. But lately, silence no longer carries restlessness with it. It enters the room gently, takes a seat nearby, like an old friend who hasn't visited in a long time. No questions, no need for attention, just presence. And strangely enough, Taurus no longer feels the urge to push it away. In that quiet, thoughts stop competing with one another. They appear slowly, like streetlights turning on one by one at the far end of the road. Some thoughts feel familiar. Some are completely new. Others are emotions that were set aside during busy days. They aren't loud. They don't demand immediate answers. They simply want to be seen, to be acknowledged as existing. There are nights when Taurus sits still, able to hear the steady movement of the clock, the faint touch of wind against the window. Sounds that were once overlooked now become gentle anchors. They remind Taurus that the world keeps moving, even when nothing is being done. And that realization brings a quiet sense of comfort, one that's difficult to explain. That silence also opens the door to questions that were never asked before. Not big questions about direction or major decisions, but simple, human ones. What do I truly need when the day ends? What am I holding on to out of habit, rather than desire? These questions don't weigh Taurus down. They drift in like a thin layer of smoke, then slowly dissolve into the calm air. Within that stillness, Taurus realizes that reacting isn't always necessary. Explaining isn't always required. There's no constant need to appear strong or steady in the ways others have come to expect. Some nights only ask for sitting quietly, letting silence wrap around the room, allowing emotions to sort themselves out at their own pace. And when the night passes like this, Taurus moves into sleep feeling lighter. Not because everything has been resolved, but because there was permission to simply be with oneself. Silence is no longer an empty space to be filled. It becomes a safe place to return to, whenever needed, without explanation, and without rushing forward. And it's within those quiet pauses that old emotions begin to return in a very different way. No warning, no noise, no wave strong enough to throw Taurus off balance. They appear like late-night light cast onto a familiar wall in a dark room, just bright enough to recognize the shape of what once existed there. But no longer blinding, no longer forcing the eyes to turn away. Sometimes it's a memory so small it feels like it should have been forgotten long ago. An old afternoon. A sentence once overheard. A face that used to feel very familiar. Before, the moment those images surfaced, Taurus would react immediately. Pull away. Try to explain them. Wonder why they were still there. Lately, it's different. Those emotions arrive, pause for a moment, then quietly find a place to sit in the mind, without causing any disturbance. Taurus notices there's no longer a need to push them away, and no need to hold on tightly either, just noticing. Like standing by a window at night, watching a car pass by, its headlights brushing briefly across the wall, then disappearing. Nothing to chase, nothing to cling to. Everything unfolds, complete within its own moment. There are emotions that once felt heavy, tied to stories Taurus lived through with patience and steady endurance. Now they return in a different form, softer, slower, with fewer sharp edges. Not because those emotions have completely changed, but because Taurus is no longer standing in the same place from which they once viewed them. On quiet evenings, when the room is lit just enough to see things clearly without strain, Taurus can sit there and let those emotions drift on their own. No need to name them. No need to draw conclusions. They feel like old book pages turned by chance, read for a few lines, then gently closed, without needing to read from beginning to end. There's a clear gentleness now in the way Taurus receives these feelings. No longer harsh with oneself for having felt that way. No longer questioning how things should have been different. Just an acceptance that whatever once touched the heart may still visit again, without needing to stay for long. Taurus begins to sense that emotions don't always arrive to test us or pull us back into the past. Sometimes they come simply to be seen once more, under a different light, in a calmer state of being. And when that happens, there's no strong reaction, no defense, no grasping, just quiet observation, then letting them pass, the way wind moves across an empty road late at night. Within that gentleness, a new inner space begins to open. Not large, but warm. A space that allows the past to exist without controlling the present. that allows emotions to appear without needing definition. And within that space, Taurus realizes the pace has slowed, yet the footing feels steadier. There's a calm carried forward now, one that doesn't come from forgetting what once was, but from no longer being pulled along by it. As the pull of old emotions begins to soften, a gentle emptiness starts to appear. Not an emptiness that needs to be filled, but a space wide enough to see more clearly what is still being carried. In that quiet, Taurus suddenly realizes there are things that have been held for a very long time, not loudly, not on display, but like familiar objects resting in a drawer. They stayed because they were once necessary, because they once helped Taurus remain steady during days of strong wind. And now, as that drawer is opened, the first feeling isn't sadness or regret, but a soft kind of curiosity. On some evenings, the light in the room lowers just enough, and Taurus sits down, allowing thoughts to move slowly. No attempt to organize them, no search for answers, just looking at how the self reacts to things that once felt deeply important. Looking at how certain old beliefs are still there, like small stones placed along the road, not blocking the path, but no longer needing to be carried. The feeling is strange, familiar, like an old jacket that still fits, yet fresh like a breeze moving through a quiet hallway late at night. Taurus doesn't rush to ask what should be left behind. Instead, a softer question appears. What still fits the rhythm of life right now? That question doesn't weigh the heart down. It arrives gently, like turning the worn pages of an old notebook. Some pages bring a quiet smile, a reminder of how far the journey has gone. Others invite a longer pause, revealing the handwriting of an earlier self, honest, awkward, and deeply real. In silence, personal values don't show up as a checklist. They appear as small, everyday choices. How time is spent, how no is spoken when it's needed, how an unplanned afternoon is allowed to simply exist. Taurus begins to see there's no longer a need to prove stability by keeping everything unchanged. Stability now feels like a small flame inside a quiet room. It doesn't flare up, but it's warm enough to know this place feels like home. At times, an old thought stops by to see if it still belongs. Taurus doesn't answer right away. It's allowed to sit there for a moment, under the late-night light, until it quietly decides whether to stay or move on. No judgment, no force, only respect for the path already walked, and for the self that exists now. That strangely comforting feeling spreads slowly. It doesn't carry promises. It doesn't sketch out a future. It simply reminds Taurus that some values no longer need to be held out of habit, and that some things are still worth keeping because they continue to warm the heart. A sense of just enough begins to settle in, clear enough to avoid getting lost, light enough to keep the heart from feeling heavy. As the night continues, the room remains quiet, the light stays soft. Taurus stands up and gently closes that imagined notebook, not because it's finished, but because it can be opened again at any time. And within those slow steps, a new steadiness takes shape, not loud, not on display, just the feeling of walking alongside what truly fits, at a personal rhythm, distinctly Taurus. And as that rhythm slows, it isn't that everything around Taurus changes, but that the way Taurus moves through it does. A morning no longer broken into pieces by notifications or lists of things to finish. Just standing there, in a kitchen still dim with early light, letting the kettle heat slowly, letting the smell of coffee spread little by little. There's no sense of being late, no urge to rush. Time is simply there, moving evenly, without pressure. The cup of coffee rests on the table, cooling in its own way. Before, Taurus might have felt a hint of regret, or hurried to drink it while it was still hot. Now, that cooling becomes part of the moment, as if things don't need to be perfect to hold value. They only need to be present, in the right place, at their own pace. Some afternoons pass without the need to answer anyone right away. The phone stays still, the screen dark. Sunlight outside the window moves slowly across the floor, leaving thin traces of brightness, then quietly withdrawing. Taurus sits there, doing nothing in particular, yet sensing a calm sense of fullness. Not because everything has been completed, but because there's no longer a feeling of being pulled away from oneself. That breathing space isn't large. It doesn't last long, but it's enough for Taurus to realize that every minute doesn't need to be filled with action or thought. There are small gaps, like rests between notes in a piece of music, making the melody easier to hear. And within those pauses, the body and the mind adjust on their own, in a way that feels natural. Taurus begins to notice details that once slipped by unnoticed. The sound of footsteps on the floor, the familiar weight of a chair when sitting down, a draft of air passing through the window at the end of the day. These small things don't carry messages. They don't try to explain anything. Yet they make everything feel more real. As if life is speaking in a very soft voice, and Taurus finally has the time to listen. Within this slower rhythm, there's no sense of falling behind. Instead, Taurus feels closer to the present moment. Each experience is no longer stretched tight by expectation or worry. It's simply there, whole with whatever is happening. And that brings a gentle sense of ease, not born from control, but from allowing. As the day gradually comes to a close, Taurus notices that this new breathing space isn't something that needs to be protected or held tightly. It can come and go, like an inhale and an exhale. And just knowing that it's possible to return to this slower rhythm whenever needed feels like enough. There's no need to change an entire life. Just to hold on to this feeling. That even in the most ordinary moments, Taurus can sense being in the right place, in a way that feels gentle and deeply honest. As night arrives, everything seems to gently draw inward. The sounds of the day retreat. The light softens. What remains is a room breathing slowly and evenly. There's nothing that needs to be finished. No question demanding an answer. Just the sense that a day has passed, leaving behind movements so subtle they're almost invisible. There comes a moment when Taurus lies still and looks into the darkness above, realizing that not every change needs a name. Some shifts only need to be felt. Like the ground beneath the feet tilting just slightly, enough for the body to adjust on its own, but not enough to throw off balance. And within that adjustment, there's a quiet confidence that one is still standing in their own way. That feeling of something being different doesn't arrive with explanations. It doesn't ask for action. It doesn't demand full understanding. It simply exists quietly, like a small light still glowing late at night. Not bright, not guiding the way. Just enough to know that the darkness isn't completely empty. Taurus may find themselves wondering whether moments like this have appeared recently. A time of slowing down. A moment of not reacting right away. A chance to feel oneself more clearly in the middle of very ordinary things. That question doesn't need an answer spoken aloud. Sometimes it only needs to be placed there, then left alone, like a small stone resting near a window. When the night fully closes, everything still isn't neatly arranged. And somehow, there's no longer a need for it to be. Some days end like that. Not complete in any obvious way, yet full in a manner that's hard to describe. And in that final quiet space, Taurus lets the feeling remain a little longer, as a gentle reminder that sometimes, simply listening is already enough.